This drawing is 2,000 years old. You can only see it properly from an airplane. Picture a flat, dry desert in Peru. No rain, no plants. Just dust and rock, stretching for miles. Now picture a giant hummingbird drawn into that dust. Not painted, not built with stone, just drawn. One single line, almost 300 feet long, shaped like a bird. And here's the strange part, you cannot see the full shape unless you go up in the air. From the ground, it just looks like scratches in the dirt. So who draws a picture that only makes sense from the sky, in a time before anyone could fly? This is the story of the Nazca Lines. Let's start with where we are. Southern Peru, on the coast, in a stretch of desert called the Pampa, Colorado. It's one of the driest places on Earth. Some parts get less than half an inch of rain in an entire year. The ground here is covered in a layer of small, reddish-brown stones. Under that layer is lighter-colored dirt and sand. That difference in color is the whole secret. If you move the dark stones away, you expose the light ground underneath. Do that in a long, careful line, and you've drawn something that can last for centuries, because there's barely any rain or wind here to wash it away. That's exactly what happened. Somewhere between 500 BC and 500 AD, the Nazca people, who lived in this region, started making lines. Thousands of them. Straight lines that run for miles. Big geometric shapes like triangles, spirals, and trapezoids. And then the ones everyone knows, the animal drawings. A monkey with a curled tail, a spider, a condor with wings stretched wide, a hummingbird caught mid-flight. Over 800 straight lines, around 300 geometric shapes, and about 70 animal and plant figures have been found so far, spread across roughly 170 square miles of desert. Now, here's a fact that surprises most people. The Nazca people did not have airplanes. They did not have hot air balloons that we know of. They had no way to see their own art from above. So why draw something you can never fully see? For a long time, nobody could answer that because almost nobody outside Peru even knew the lines existed. They're carved so lightly into the desert floor, usually only a few inches deep, that from the ground they just look like faint paths or natural marks in the rock. It wasn't until the 1920s and 1930s, when small airplanes started flying over the region, that pilots and passengers looked down and realized they were seeing giant pictures. A Peruvian archaeologist named Toribio Mejia Cespe had actually studied some of the lines on foot back in 1927, but it was those early flights that showed the world just how big and how detailed the full designs really were. That discovery pulled in scientists from all over. One of the most important was an American historian named Paul Kossak, who studied the lines in the 1940s. He's the one who first suggested they might be connected to astronomy, that the lines could point toward where the sun rises on certain important days of the year, like the summer solstice. He called the whole desert the largest astronomy book in the world. But the person who truly gave her life to the Nazca Lines was a German mathematician named Maria Rieke. She arrived in Peru in the 1930s and became completely devoted to studying, measuring, and protecting these drawings. For decades, she lived out in that desert, often alone, using simple tools like a broom, a tape measure, and a ladder to study the lines up close and keep tourists and vehicles from damaging them. She spent over 50 years on this. Local people started calling her the Lady of the Lines. Because of her work, the Peruvian government eventually made the area protected, and in 1994, UNESCO named the Nazca Lines a World Heritage Site. So now we know who studied them, but we still don't fully know why they were made. And this is where the real mystery lives. Because there isn't just one theory. There are several, and each one is backed by real evidence. The first idea is the astronomy theory, the one Paul Kossak proposed. The thought here is that some lines line up with the positions of the sun, moon, or certain stars at key points in the year, almost like a giant calendar drawn into the ground. This would have helped the Nazca people track the seasons, which mattered a lot for farming in such a dry place. Some later studies did find that a handful of lines match sunrise and sunset points on the solstices. But when researchers checked all the lines using computers, most of them didn't line up with any specific star or date. So the astronomy idea explains a few lines, but not the whole picture. The second idea, and the one most researchers lean toward today, is about water. Remember, this is one of the driest deserts on the planet. Water was the most valuable thing in the Nazca people's world. Some archaeologists believe the lines and shapes were part of rituals asking the gods for rain walked by people
during ceremonies. Picture a line of people walking the exact path of one of these giant shapes, maybe chanting, maybe carrying offerings, as part of a ceremony to bring water to their crops. Interestingly, many of the straight lines seem to point toward water sources or toward the mountains where rain and rivers originally came from. Some researchers have also connected the spider and monkey figures to constellations that were linked, in nearby South American traditions, with rain and the coming of water. There's also a third theory, a bit newer, that comes from studying where exactly the lines are. Some lines and geoglyphs sit right along ancient walking paths, the kind that connected different Nazca settlements and gathering sites. This has led some researchers to think of the lines less like messages to the sky and more like a kind of sacred road system, something people walked as part of community events, maybe to trade goods, meet other groups, or hold festivals. Basically, less message to the gods above and more shared meeting ground here on Earth, with the shapes acting like giant markers for people traveling on foot. Now here's something a lot of people don't know. The Nazca lines aren't the only lines in this desert. Nearby, in an area called Palpa, there's another set of geoglyphs that are actually older than the famous Nazca figures, some going back even further, closer to 500 BC or earlier. The Palpa lines are a little different. A lot of them are drawn on hillsides instead of flat ground, which means, unlike the Nazca figures, you actually can see some of them without flying, just by standing on a nearby hill. That detail matters a lot, because it tells us these desert societies were experimenting with giant ground art for a long time, not just making one confusing batch of drawings all at once. It looks more like a tradition that grew and changed over centuries. How did they even draw these so accurately, without being able to see the full shape from above? This part might be the most impressive piece of the whole story. Researchers studying the figures have found that many were likely built using a small-scale drawing first, then scaled up using stakes and rope to keep the proportions accurate across huge distances. Wooden stakes have actually been found at the end points of some lines, which supports this idea, a kind of survey system, using simple materials, that let them stretch a tiny sketch into something the size of a football field and keep the lines almost perfectly straight for miles. No satellites, no drones, just measuring, walking, and careful hands. Think about the patience that takes. Someone plans out the shape of a hummingbird small enough to hold. Then a team walks it out across the desert floor, stake by stake, rope by rope, moving thousands of small stones by hand, trusting the math even though not one of them will ever see the finished shape the way we can today, from a plane window, thousands of feet in the air. That's really what makes the Nazca lines so powerful, even now. It's not just the size, or the mystery of why they were made, it's the trust. A society built something enormous, something they knew they'd never personally witness completed from above, because they believed it mattered enough anyway. Maybe for the gods. Maybe for the rain. Maybe just for each other, walking the same path together, generation after generation. Now, you've probably heard one more theory. The one about aliens. It's the idea that the Nazca lines were runways or messages for visitors from another planet, because how else could ancient people make something so precise without seeing it from above? This idea got popular in the 1960s and 1970s, mostly from books that weren't written by archaeologists. But actual researchers who've spent years studying the site, including Maria Reich herself, showed this isn't true. We've already covered how the lines were likely made. Small models scaled up with stakes and rope, a method that's been tested and actually works. Archaeologists have also found the tools, the wooden stakes, and even unfinished lines that show the drawing process in progress. None of that lines up with the alien idea. It lines up with skilled, patient human work. The alien theory is exciting, sure, but it also quietly takes credit away from the people who actually did this. The Nazca engineers, planners, and laborers who pulled off something incredible with nothing but rope, stakes, and knowledge passed down through generations. And the story isn't finished yet. In the last few years, researchers using drones and even artificial intelligence have scanned the desert for new figures that are too faint for the human eye to spot easily. In 2019, a research team from Yamagata University in Japan found a new geoglyph shaped like a two-headed snake, right in the Nazca region. Then in 2022 and 2023, using AI-assisted image analysis over thousands of aerial photos, researchers found even more previously unknown figures, some showing animals, some showing human-like shapes,
hidden in plain sight in a desert people have been studying for almost 100 years. It's proof that even with all our modern tools, this ancient site still has secrets left to give up. Today, you can still fly over the Nazca Desert and see them, almost exactly the way they looked over 1,000 years ago. Dry air, calm winds, and very little rain kept them safe for all this time. But they're not indestructible. In recent years, there have been cases of trucks and protesters accidentally driving across parts of the site, cutting into lines that took a civilization generations to lay down, and that no one can perfectly repair. It's a reminder that something can survive 2,000 years of wind and sun, and still be undone in a single afternoon by something as simple as a tire track. So the next time you see a photo of that giant hummingbird stretched across the Peruvian desert, remember, nobody who drew it ever got to see it the way we do. They built it on faith, on math, and on ropes and stakes, for a sky that was watching, even if they never could be. And somewhere out there in that same desert, there are still lines nobody has fully explained yet, waiting for someone to finally understand what they were trying to say.